Hey, good morning, everyone. I know you've been sitting here thinking, what happened? Did the internet eat Mike and Norm? Imagine that, saying that to the lords of the internet. Those of you of a certain age, anyhow, eat me. And the internet says, okay, and you're gone. Just like that, you're canceled. Welcome back to Law and Legitimacy. It is Wednesday, and I am still stranded in Washington, D.C., trying to fight my way out of the swamp. We entered day 82 of the proceedings today, day sixth, I guess, of jury deliberations. We had notes from the jury yesterday that went beyond sort of bookkeeping entries, like where do we find X, Y, and Z, and they started to ask meaningful questions on the law, and nothing braces you for the potential for execution like a meaningful question on the law for a juror. All of your fears come out at once, and you begin to relitigate every single decision in the case, and 4.5 months flashes through your mind, not quickly, in a seeming eternal game of second guessing yourself in every decision, and you wonder, should I have done X? Should I have done Y? Does this mean that? Does that mean this? And is my client going to be convicted today? And you realize at the end of an exercise like that just how pointless it is to speculate about what a jury is going to do, but how inevitable it is that you speculate. And there's a larger, I suppose, psychoanalytic lesson in that in life. Here we are trapped in time and snared by space. Not one of us chose the lives we live, but we find ourselves in a bounded universe with choices that have consequences and verdicts rendered on us and our prospects each and every day in 1,001 different ways. And the potential for an infinite regress and torturing yourself is infinite. So the need for grace, and the welcoming presence of grace, love, faith, hope, and charity in all of our lives, and my great sense of thankfulness to you, Mike, and to you out here in law or LAL land, Lalians. So lots going on in the world today. And so today with Proud Boysville, the jury will only be in from 9 to 12. So if we're going to have a verdict, I suspect it'll be early in the day so the jury can get it reported, recorded, and get out the door and get on with their lives. Can't tell what'll happen. When they came in to say goodbye at the end of the day, they had their game faces on and looked like they'd been working pretty hard. So hope to get a verdict today. If not, we'll be back at it tomorrow. What's going on out there, Mike?
Oh, there's a lot going on, but I don't really watch the NBA much these days. But anytime playoff time comes around, I'm always looking forward to seeing who gets out of the crowd and starts playing at a high level. And let's see, I think last night we had the Lakers actually overcome the Golden State Warriors, which for those watching, listening, know that the Lakers have had a rather tortured season. I think LeBron is in his 20th year, which from my personal perspective is just really difficult to reconcile. I remember when LeBron came in as like a 17, 18-year-old directly into the NBA, had that big Nike contract, was just a young man. And then seeing him, put up double doubles in his 20th season, and going from a tortured season now to getting into the second round of the NBA playoffs is, pretty incredible, notwithstanding my issues and criticism of him in public life, right? Some of the opinions and some of the things that he does with his influence, I'm not a huge fan of. However, it's nice to see that. And then we've got Justin Carter in here saying, yeah, Knicks, baby. We'll see what happens when Jimmy Buckets comes back for the Heat. He was out for game 2. So you guys evened it up at 1-1. Nice to see the Knicks in the playoffs. And I say that without being condescending at all. It's nice to see that franchise coming up a little bit and having some culture there. What I love.
Wait, don't even give me that Southeast Conference nonsense. The Northeast is the cultural home of the United States, and it should have sports dynasties. So when the Knicks return to playing excellent, that's rightness being restored in the universe.
I haven't been alive. Look, Norm, I just haven't been alive to see it. So
well,
I hear you talking, but all I see is a fat Spike Lee sitting, courtside, but nothing to show for it. So, we'll see what happens. And Justice says, I'll take it, Mike. I know. Look, I can't talk that much because I'm a North Carolina boy, and love that we have the Hornets franchise back. It was gone for quite a few years and it's back, but it's not as if we're doing anything with it these days. One thing, Norm, I'm in particular, I know that we'll talk more about this in the coming years, but as a student of basketball, I've always been enamored with what I would call innovators on the offensive side of the ball. And James Harden has had quite a run in the early part of his career, and then finds himself in Philadelphia. And just this time, like last year, all the talk was that James Harden is washed. And I refer to him affectionately as as an innovator on the offensive side of the ball, because he's just a natural born bucket getter. The guy knows how to put the ball in the cup, whether it's 30 feet from the basket or whether it's some sort of weird hesitation off, keeping the defender off balance and able to slice in the lane and draw contact, that kind of stuff. He's always just been a dynamic player. He came off of a game, I think it was not last night, the night before. Joel Embiid is on the Sixers, named Player of the Year for the NBA. He was out that game, and the Sixers still got it done against a very young, lean, and hungry Celtics team behind a 45-point effort of James Harden. Love to see that. He's 33 years old, so I identify with him more than you can imagine, right? Seeing somebody, what is the old saying, Norm? I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm as good once as I'll ever be. I love it. Yeah. So nice to see that going on. I'll be paying attention, and I have love for the Celtics as well. I think that team is destined for much more than it's done so far.
Oh, so I mean, Lawyer Will is very active this morning. The Knicks have been underachievers my whole life. Oh, ouch, ouch. The only notable thing from the Knicks during my life was Patrick Ewing and Spike Lee egging on Reggie Miller. All right. LeBron sure likes to read first 10 pages of a lot of different books. All right.
Oh, BTL's hitting Justin with the Jeremy Lin reference. I apologize, Justin. That was ill-advised.
Well, So, Lawyer Will, you asked earlier, has the jury been asking questions? They have, but usually there's at least something every day. And until yesterday, they had been, we can't find the exhibit where so-and-so threw a water bottle, or we can't, what's the exhibit number for this? Yesterday, they began to ask questions about how the jury charge hung together, and they began to ask questions about how the jury interrogatory, that is the verdict form, hung together. So it's, they're active and they're engaged, and I think we're going to get there soon.
If you can tease that a little bit, I'll try to find the Parloff tweets where we can actually bring up what the questions were, if you're comfortable with that, Norm.
It's speculating. It's speculating. Okay. It's speculating. Let's move into the world that we all inhabit. This whole real world. I don't know what's going on with Tucker. I know I have reason to believe that he is still under contract with Fox, and what he can say is limited. I'm aware that there's a daily drumbeat of stories about him, with material presumably leaked from Fox to others, and there's suspicion that what Fox is trying to do is make sure that it's difficult for him to reemerge elsewhere by flooding the market with bad news about him. But I'm not sure it's all bad. I'm not sure what Tucker's financial circumstances are, but I'm urging him to come quickly to terms with Fox and move on if he's going to reemerge as a commentator. But this next piece startled me. And it made me wonder what's going on out there. The New York Times late in the day yesterday broke a story that Tucker had sent a text message or an email around Fox or to others right after January 6th, in which he saw some folks attacking a member of Antifa. And he conceded that he wanted that Antifa member beaten, perhaps to death. And he was disturbed by the video because that's not how white men fight. And also he was disturbed by his reaction, by his wishing violence on the Antifa member. And so this email has been linked as what exactly? And, the Times, given its 1619 orientation, I think looks for any opportunity to show that, being an old white male is akin to a moral cancer. So, I mean, I can understand why they'd spin it up. But I want to raise a topic with you, Mike, that
before we go on, can I read the full quote, the full
right, yeah,
full message? So of course you mentioned that that there was a passage where Carlson said, quote, jumping a guy like that is dishonorable. Obviously, it's not how white men fight. Here's the longer passage. He says, I really wanted them to hurt the kid. I could taste it. Then somewhere deep in my brain, an alarm went off. This isn't good for me. I'm becoming something I don't want to be. The Antifa creep is a human being. Much as I despise what he says and does, much as I'm sure I'd hate him personally if I knew him, I shouldn't gloat over his suffering. I should be bothered by it. I should remember that somewhere somebody probably loves this kid and would be crushed if he was killed. If I don't care about those things, if I reduce people to their politics, how am I better than he is?
And I think that's a very, very profound observation. At least it resonated with me because, I have found that, on social media, if somebody shows me something of two guys fighting, it's interesting to me. I've represented the Proud Boys now for a while. I've been involved in Alex Jones's universe. I'm aware that Antifa is a real thing, and I'm hostile to that group. I'm aware of the doxing and the harm they've done to other people. And so when I see somebody bring it to Antifa, I'm sort of with Tucker. Yeah, go ahead, beat the shit out of the guy. And then I start. No. I mean, I'm being real, and it doesn't. In reality, hurts sometimes. And then I read Tucker's remarks, and I also know, that I've met Antifa people, and when you shake a hand, and you start to talk about your common hopes or your dreams, you realize you have far more in common than what separates you. And Tucker's response has sort of inchoate gravitation toward elimination of his adversary, toward exaltation and violence against the others. That corresponds to something that I feel, but it also his sense of shock at himself and his sense of the need to distance himself from these atavistic sort of responses or primitive sort of responses also resonates. And so once again, as far as I'm concerned, Tucker, I don't know if he points a way forward, but he shows an element of reality that I think is fruitful to talk about, because I do think that as we become polarized and the other becomes an object of fear, you end up hating the thing you fear and you want to eliminate what you hate. And the prospect of political violence and organized political violence seems to grow, at least incrementally, if not significantly, but it seems to increase a little bit each year, each month. And I appreciated this story about Tucker for his putting the brakes on himself. But I also appreciated him for his honesty with respect to wanting to eliminate his adversary, because I do think that's part of the human psyche. As far as the New York Times,
that's absolutely the truth. Yeah, yeah. I wanted to make sure. I mean, that makes him human, right? Yeah. Those tendencies towards our lesser or our baser selves, the id, as it is sometimes called. I don't know how this is. I don't know how this has become what it's, I think, attempting to be. But for whatever that's worth, I don't know that it's really landing. The comments in the chat on both sides, YouTube and Rumble, people are kind of just sort of in an eye roll capacity at this story. But it does give us a unique window into Tucker. I mean, in the confines of his private life, if he can even enjoy that, this is what he reduced to writing. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, because, I say this and knowing full and well that additional things can be leaked, right? There may be additional exchanges, and this is going to be a slow stream that we have to endure. This is yet another front in sort of that war to deplatform and unperson Tucker in a way that is most politically advantageous to a certain partisan group. But I would like to just say in this instance that it's actually, if I'm Tucker, if I'm anybody, if I'm anyone close to Tucker, I'm actually really heartened to see that, in the darkness of, private conversation, that this is the sort of thing that he would think about and put in writing and communicate to somebody else.
And I think it's the sort of thing we're all thinking about at one level or another, whether we're just honest about it. So this idea of depersoning him, I hope that what he's up to is writing a book, and I hope he can write an honest book. I have text communication with him. So I sent him a recommendation. I said, read Rudin's translation of Augustine's Confessions if you're taking some time to go into the next chapter of your life, because that sense of a self in search of something better, but forever mired in its own shortcomings, and the surprising confrontation and transforming confrontation with grace if you're open to it, and the need for faith, hope, and charity as beacons in a troubled world. That will say a lot, and I think Tucker has the potential to say a lot to us. So I don't know why Not How White Men Fight became the headline. It's again this tawdry and tedious elevation of race into the be all end all, and I'm just not buying. And I'm not buying what the New York Times is selling. Lawyer Will writes in Rumble, I didn't realize Norm could read Rumble comments. Now we're in a brave new world. Well, yes, we are. And then, of course, it's me again. Cy says, Norm started reading Monday. Surprised me too. So it's me again, Cy. Send us your address. We will send you some hate mail. Nah, I can.
Old dogs new tricks, baby.
I can take it. Hunter Biden. I don't know if you're following the baby mama drama with Hunter and his one-time paranoid London Roberts. There was a little bit of drama in an Arkansas courtroom yesterday when Hunter and his lawyers, plural, including Abby Lowell, a very high-powered, prominent white-collar criminal defense lawyer from Washington, D.C., flew to Arkansas to have a skirmish in a child support contest. Hunter sired a child. The child's name is Navy Joan. I think she's 4. She's cute as a button. And apparently he did so in a one-night stand with Miss Luden Roberts. Claimed at one point in his life he couldn't remember it, so he contested.
Which is just surprising to me.
Yeah,
I would have never guessed that.
Of Hunter. No, I mean, yeah. I remember all of the women he would say. And then, how many is that? Well, that's a big number. How much time do you have? I mean, Hunter claims that in the wake of his divorce,
here's my laptop.
he lost his libidinal compass, and any port helped him weather the storm. And Miss Roberts just happened to be one of those ports. So she's like, Mama, where's my pa? His dad's in the White House. Ha, ha, ha. So she takes him to court. He settles the paternity suit for a reported $2.5 million and has been paying. And I don't know if he paid a lump sum payment in addition to the monthly payments he's been making, but he's now claiming that he's run up against financial hard times, and he has sought a modification of his monthly support payments, claiming that he's paid thus far $750,000 to Miss London, or to Miss Roberts rather, for the support of his child, but he needs out from the $20,000 a month payment. The trial court, Judge Holly Meyer, excoriated for those, this is for Janice out there who likes to play word of the day, ripped the skin off of him, excoriated the lawyers and him, saying, look, you've stonewalled the other side in discovery about your assets, your income. I mean, you're selling paintings, Hunter, through a New York gallery. You can't even tell us who's buying them, how much you're making. I'm not buying, the judge said, the claim that there's been a substantial change in circumstances, which is what it takes to modify a child support obligation. So you're going to have to comply with discovery and sit for a deposition and give meaningful answers to questions about your financial status. And oh, by the way, somebody here has done a 655-page report on the contents of your computer. And this, too, will be a subject of inquiry. So suddenly one gets the sense that we're likely to get a whole lot more information about Hunter Biden, or perhaps Burisma, the Ukrainian firm that his father hooked him up with, the Biden family's relationship with China, and just what it is that makes his financial world go round and round. The Guardian, a British newspaper, reported that the judge was less than amused that he turned up with multiple lawyers in an Arkansas courtroom, including Abby Lowell. According to the Guardian, Lowell makes $855 an hour, and isn't that a lot for a guy who's broke? I have good reason to believe Lowell makes a lot more than that. This is an expensive town. But it was interesting to me that Hunter had Abby by his side, because Abby is where you go if you're going to face some serious white-collar criminal problems. And it suggests to me that he came along to protect not just Hunter's financial interests in the child support fight, but his criminal interests in any fight involving involving his financial arrangements and his financial
Well,
arrangements.
since we're so interested in where people spend their money and whether it may or may not be related to campaign finance law violations, etc., it would be interesting if Hunter has fallen on such hard times and there has been such a substantial change in his circumstances, such that the court is warranted in changing his monthly child support obligation. Who is paying the legal bills, and under what line item are they paying? I say that sort of tongue in cheek, just because obviously making the reference to Trump, Cohen, and Stormy Daniels, but it is worth noting that this has a lot to do with this has major implications on the election in the upcoming cycle. What's going on in this case? And if something as tangential as what was going on with Trump back in 2015, 16, 17 could be brought forth, years later and put on display in Manhattan the way it is, I certainly think that this is worthy of similar or better scrutiny than that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've never been taken with the Hunter Biden stories. I mean, he just seems like such a.
I was going to dress as Hunter Biden for Halloween a couple of years ago. I was just,
Are you serious?
What a wild guy. Yeah, just as a joke. What a wild dude. Just crack addicted, prostitutes all over the world, sort of like hot boy, just typical. Even if you remove America from it, just think about, from a political dynasty, right? His dad is now in the White House. He's just out here living life, right? His dad's been in the White House for 8 years as vice president. He's been in Congress for 50 years. You've never really, you're one of the most unremarkable people on the planet, and yet you get to do remarkable things. I just, there's something uniquely American about that. So I thought that whole saga was really hilarious.
I just look at him and I get depressed. I mean, he's the kind of guy that lines up outside of my door on a Monday morning saying, "I need a lawyer," and I'm like, man, I went to law school, but I'm too depressed to deal with you. I mean, there's just not. I mean, the elevator doesn't even go all the way to the top. I'm with it's me again, Cy. It seems dumb to fight the disbursements.
I was about to say the same thing. I agree.
It's a tragic miscalculation. Let's see how far it goes.
Well, are we willing to say, hey, perhaps there's going to be a default judgment entered in this case?
Well, I mean, having been involved in a high stakes case where, a judge got on one of the parties about discovery compliance, the worst that could happen to Hunter is, he's the one who filed the motion apparently to modify. So she'd deny the motion. Now, if the young woman, Miss Roberts, can develop information that Hunter is withholding information about his true financial status, the court could conceively raise the support obligation. And so he may have wandered into a situation where he gets the judge angry enough and motivated enough to demand that he provide answers that could lead to God only knows where, and presumably to a higher payment. So one gets the sense that Miss Luden Roberts might well settle this case for a lump sum payment along the way, and so, if the child has to be supported until the age, let's say, of 18, that's 14 more years, at $250,000 a year, a $4 or $5 million payment could take care of that. She'd probably ask for like 10 million or so. And so keep an eye on this case. Here's the prediction. My prediction is as the litigation unfolds and the discovery from Hunter is not satisfactorily complied with, there will be a trial, I think, in July. Sometime in early July, Hunter will settle this for an undisclosed sum. It'll be leaked, and that sum will be $10 million. It'll be basically double the face value of the annual payments to the child over the course of the next 14 years.
Somebody put that on the board. So one of the listeners put that prediction on the board. We need to do a Norm's prediction board.
I'm doing pretty well this year so far, but that is my. So you raise topics about Hunter and his financial arrangements and Donald Trump and his you noted last night we've now got a bill that's going to be supported by Gaetz and others to limit the trading and owning of financial instruments by members of Congress. I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, I do. The topic surfaced on my radar when I saw congressmen criticizing Clarence Thomas, for having a wealthy friend and accepting flights from him and not reporting a real estate transaction. And yeah, that may be troubling, but it's far more troubling to me that we've got congressmen becoming multimillionaires on their relatively modest congressional salaries. And so obviously the turnabout would be, okay, if we're going to poke at the justices, we're going to also poke at the congressman. But I'm not sure we should be poking at either. I mean, it is unseemly to me that congressmen can engage in insider trading if they do, and that would be a crime. But do we really want to patrol our public officials' financial lives such that we're going to drive even more people from public service?
Yeah, I think the big question for me on this topic is, what does this do to address the catalyst for the bill itself, which is obviously the extreme wins that the likes of Nancy Pelosi and others within that consortium yielded through their own trades behind COVID and these other over the last several years. So, if we're going to have a bill to restrict trading and ownership of financial instruments by members of Congress moving forward, upon what is this bill sitting and trying to address a problem, right? Because the public perception is obviously that there's insider information that these members of Congress can use either directly or indirectly through members of their family or indirect financial interest to kind of do an end around and trade on information before it's going to happen. And there was a headline in the news recently about one member of Congress in particular that has made money predicting, weirdly, the bank crises out in the West, right? And I think it was First Republic. One woman dumped shares of it, right before everything crashed, and then miraculously bought stock in JP Morgan days before the announcement that the federal government was going to oversee the sale of First Republic to JP Morgan, right? And so there are things that the public is looking at with legitimate scrutiny, legitimate concern, because obviously, I think there are some members of the public would say, well, look, if they're making trades, their trades are public. Why don't you just mimic what they're doing, right? But the problem is that we haven't audited this to see if there's any there, as you would say, Norm. And until there is something that we can point to say, look, this member of Congress's conduct was beyond the standards that we set forth for these reasons. This member, it appears as though we are in an era of trading and information flow that is very difficult for us to see and stop at the point of contact. And as such, all trades will be subject to blah, right? But we don't have that. I think this is mostly political theater. AOC and Matt Gaetz have identified that their constituents on both sides of the aisle harbor this resentment and contempt for elderly members of Congress who have assumed positions of power and influence and who are perceived to be benefiting in large measure by their access to information. And they're doing this, I think, just to secure their own political futures. I don't see that this bill is going to have any practical effect to nullify or stamp out any of this alleged activity.
No, I hear you, and it is the case that a congressman has access to superior information, and it is the case that the world's beating a path to their door, and their staff can reach out for information and can become aware of situations in markets that would give them the ability to invest, on the short term in the wake of crisis. I'm just not sure I know what the solution is. I know what, with presidents, they put their affairs into a blind trust managed by another during their occupancy in office, and it's expected they'll only be there for 4 or maybe 8 years if it's a 2-term presidency. Some of these congressmen, occupy congresswomen, occupy office for a lifetime. and then over time they cash in. It may be that we need an ombudsman, or maybe there should be some sort of ethics requirement where their trades are monitored. Well,
I'm wary of trying to interject some sort of board or clearinghouse or some sort of apparatus that is decided by the people who themselves are going to be regulated. It just doesn't seem like that's going to be something that is done properly or with.
That's exactly the same criticism of the Supreme Court governing itself.
Not necessarily. These people have to win elections, term after term after term after term. And so there's an argument to say that, well, yeah, if their conduct is too beyond the pale, they won't be reelected. But what we've seen is that there's sort of this impermanence of power in certain positions in certain areas of the country that other politicians can't really break through. So I don't know. There doesn't seem.
Do we think that is this really likely to result in legislation, or is this just a moral impulse designed to provoke the sort of discussion we just had?
I think, look, okay, I'll say this. I said I don't think it's going to have any practical effect. I don't have confidence that there are going to be mechanisms within this bill that can point out and mitigate the type of conduct that we're talking around, because the truth is we can't point to anything real other than results. And as It's Me Again, Cy in the chat says, and this is a common theme for everybody watching and listening, this is a common theme for me personally on this podcast, and it's that the redress is never sufficient in these circumstances to make whole the alleged harm, right? So the Biden administration going on a tear, doing executive orders, doing all sorts of stuff that is domestic and global policy related, and only to have stuff rolled back in courts. Well, that's a delayed equity solution, and the damage is usually already done. This is another situation where that's happening. However, I think an indirect and positive consequence of this is that perhaps members of Congress stop taking unnecessary risks in this regard. And perhaps the public's knowing and the existence of this bill is sufficient to persuade that conduct back into the dark.
Maybe. And Lawyer will point out it's a rare bipartisan issue. Maybe that's its appeal to me because, obvious confidence in government is important. You can be suspicious, but you need to be able to trust it enough to keep the roads working. And it's nice to see people as different in Gaetz and AOC arriving at a common conclusion at a common location to have a discussion about something that should concern us all. On that happy note, I guess I'm going to get ready to go back over to Gilligan's Island. Yeah, that's right. Mohegan Sun's coming up on May 18th. Try to be there. You've got to tell people at the door who you've come to see. And unless a certain number of people come to see you, I don't think you're permitted to perform. It's a low bar, but show up. You'll hear me work out my new, casket-related humor.
How many versions of myself do I need to be prepared to represent while I'm there?
Just the one. That'll do. So anyhow.
Right. Well, thank you all. I know we got started a little bit late, so we're not really technically over time here by too much or anything out of the norm. But as always, please put a thumbs up on this video. Share it with your friends and family. I haven't asked for that in quite a while, but please do continue to share this with those that you think could benefit here and that you'd like to see in the chat with you every morning. We enjoy that. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, Google Play, etc. And Norm, good luck today. I have a feeling today will be the day.
I think so. And if you have one of Hunter Biden's children, or you suspect that you do, and you're looking for representation, give Mike and I a call. As T-Girl pointed out in the Rumble chat today, it was a good night's work for Hunter, for London Roberts.
That's true. See you tomorrow, Norm.
See you then.